Hello everyone. So this is probably going to be a very long video. I'm gonna try to just like hit the highlights so that it's not like 12 hours long, but there's a lot to go over because in my labor and delivery vlog that I just posted yesterday, I said that I'd be going into detail on this video. So this video is for those that want the details. I am going to go much farther into my birth story with little Miss Ruby Jane. She's in this bassinet right here, by the way, being a perfect little angel. Okay, so real quick, I'm gonna give a super quick backstory for like during my pregnancy. My pregnancy was good. I personally didn't really feel like I didn't have too many problems. I didn't throw up like in the morning, didn't have super bad morning sickness or anything. Obviously I was nauseous, but you know, what's new? But there were a few things that I ended up towards the end finding out that we had going on, and that was basically asymmetric IUGR. If you don't know what that is, you can just look it up because I could be here forever explaining that. But basically, she was just measuring really small. Her head measurement was fine, but it was her belly that was measuring really small, which is something that they really like to look for and pay attention to. And hers was very small, usually below the 10th percentile, which classifies it as IUGR. Because she had IUGR, some things that go along with that is oligohydramnios, which is low amniotic fluid, which also I had, as well as elevated Dopplers. So basically, if you think of your blood pressure being elevated, just think of the blood pressure in the umbilical cord being elevated. That's kind of the best way I can think to describe that. So she had asymmetric IUGR, low fluid, elevated Dopplers, and at my 19-week anatomy scan, they measured my cervix, and my cervix measured short. So from then on out until about 32 weeks, I got a weekly cervical length. Just to make sure it wasn't shortening any and I wasn't going into labor earlier than I am supposed to. With my short cervix and all these contractions that I was having, they decided to watch me really close. So I was put on pelvic rest, and not really bed rest, but as close as you can get to bed rest without actually having to stay in the bed. That's basically what I was on. He said he didn't want me lifting anything, obviously. Just honestly, like after work, just go home and rest every single day. So like from the beginning, they were, from my anatomy scan, I guess, they were basically just trying to keep her in because I had some pretty strong Braxton Hicks contractions that started at like the middle of my second trimester. So I would say probably like 23, 24 weeks, if not sooner. Actually, no, they did start sooner. They started at my anatomy scan when I was 19 weeks. I started feeling them about like between 20 and 24 weeks because I was actually having a contraction during my anatomy scan, and my tech was like, oh, you're having a contraction. So, and I didn't feel it super strong then. So I would say between 20 and 24 weeks, I started having noticeable Braxton Hicks contractions. And of course, nobody wants to have contractions at 24 weeks because that's too early for your baby to be here. So contractions continued on until I delivered. And because of all of these things that were going on, my doctor decided that it was probably best to go ahead and get steroid shots so that if she decided to come early, like way too early, that her lungs would be much more developed. I got 2 rounds of steroids whenever I don't remember how many weeks that was actually when I got my steroids, so that her lungs would be developed in case she decided to come early. So I think that's the quickest rundown of my pregnancy. I think that includes everything. Okay, so moving on to labor. I went in to be induced on a Tuesday night, sorry. So that Wednesday, I was 37 weeks. The day after I went in. My labor was 11 hours long being induced, so honestly, that's not too bad. Of course, like I said, I had been having contractions forever, so the Braxton Hicks anyways were nothing new to me. I had some pretty intense ones too, Definitely more than just like cramps, I guess. So I went in to be induced, and they gave me a Cytotec. I don't know if you have heard of Cytotec, but basically it's like this little pill thing that they put inside your cervix to help start contractions. So usually they just start with this and they end up having to do Pitocin and all that stuff. Well, where I was already like, she had already been trying to come since like 24 weeks. All it took for me to like go into labor was one Cytotec pill. Sometimes they'll even do two or three, I think, Cytotecs, and then they'll do Pitocin and then like do all that they can to get you to start. But all it took for me was one Cytotec, which I was thankful for because I just was not ready for Pitocin. So I'm thankful it only took one Cytotec. However, from that one Cytotec that they gave me, we realized that my contractions were constant. There was no break, and of course I had never been through labor before, so I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like. I could tell I wasn't feeling a break in between them because I was trying to like, you know, kind of see how far apart they were, and there was like never like an end to one. So I was getting really exhausted. In my labor and delivery video, I don't know if you can see it on there, but my husband got a few clips of the contractions that I was having. And they were just like, they would rise and they wouldn't come all the way back down. They would rise and then just go down and then back up and then down. And like, so it was just constant. Well, because of that, the nurse started coming in and was like, what's going on? Because her heart rate was dropping when I would have those contractions. There was just no break. So she was getting exhausted. I was getting exhausted. So then they gave me 2 shots in my arms, which I can't remember the name of those. They just kind of helped not stop the contractions, but like chill them out because they were so crazy. That helped with the constantness of the contractions, but then I was having a lot of like shaking. Like I was shaking so bad. I was like shaking the whole bed, which I know is normal, but it was like uncontrollable. So my nurse came in and gave me some IV pain meds. That helped a ton. But when the one shot wore off, my contractions started doing the same thing. Her heart rate started doing the same thing. So they gave me the shot in the other arm. Around this time, my OB came in and was like, okay, so this is not good. You know, her heart rate is totally dropping whenever you are having these contractions. So we'll keep watching you, but if this continues, like, it's just gonna have to be a C-section. She's just in distress, basically. So I was a little bummed because I did not want a C-section, like I had said in the beginning. Not that there's anything wrong with a C-section, I just personally wanted to do it vaginally. They just kept monitoring me, and thankfully they started breaking up. Her heart rate started staying strong, and all that was fine. At around 2 centimeters, I got my epidural, which I was so happy with because I had went in saying like, I want this thing ASAP. We have a crier, so she's joining for now. But anyways, my epidural was at 2 centimeters and everything went fine with that. Cameron had to leave the room, which I was upset about, but because I thought for sure he'd be able to stay in there. Epidural went fine. Not too long after that, probably maybe a couple hours after that, my doctor came in and he broke my water. So then things started going pretty fast. I would say after about 5 centimeters, I just started progressing like crazy, because at this point he was still nervous about a vaginal delivery because of just how small I was, how I had no hips. My pelvic girth was very small, and so he had tried to talk me into a C-section this whole time, but it wasn't like for sure necessary. So we continued on. I would say for labor, that's about it. So this is where things go crazy. Epidural was amazing. I recommend epidural to anybody who wants one. I felt nothing when I was pushing. Now I did start feeling contractions before I started pushing, just right before though, and obviously they hurt, but I mean, they were not too bad because the epidural helped take the edge off. But when I was pushing, like, I felt it was a breeze to push. So I was thankful for that because especially of what comes next. I pushed for about 30 minutes, like, on the dot. It was all good. Like, we were cracking jokes in there. We were all having a good time and just ready to get her out. My doctor, however, I could just tell by looking at his face, he was like just nervous. He was nervous about this because he wanted me to do a C-section. I could just see the worry on him that if I couldn't push her out, it was going to be a C-section. But as soon as he said that, I could feel, like, I just felt that she was going to be out the next push, and she was. Like, it was literally 2 minutes later maybe, and I had pushed her out. Totally unaware of the damage that had been done because I had an epidural. So I was on cloud 9. I was like, I just pushed this baby out. I didn't feel any pain while I was pushing her out. Little did I know the damage that had been done. Then, of course, I push her out and they put her up on my chest like they usually do. And I had her on there for a long time. And he was down there for a long time. And I was like, what's going on? And I, just looking at his face, he was like, I could just tell he was like, what have we done? That was the look on his face. So as I'm pushing her out, her head is sideways. The whole reason he was wanting me to do a C-section was because he thought her head was going to be too big to come out, and it was coming out sideways, which made it all the worse. Because of that, I ended up getting a 3rd degree episiotomy. So he cut me, and I also got a vacuum assist. So not only was I cut, but the vacuum does not help that. So also probably ripped me more. For probably about 45 minutes I was being stitched. I got 50 stitches down there. And he had mentioned that I was losing a lot of blood. So while she was on my chest, I started getting very lightheaded. I knew that feeling where you start getting kind of clammy and your ears start ringing. So I told whoever was listening, I was like, I feel like I'm gonna pass out. Somebody take her, because she was on my chest and I didn't want to drop her, obviously. So I said, I'm about to pass out. I need somebody to take her. They gave Cameron the little thing that I smell to like keep me in focus. And I guess it helped because I did not fully pass out, but they said I was like a solid shade of white. Like I would just, my lips, my face, everything was white. I actually remember him, like they have kind of a bag that's under you whenever you deliver. And I remember him like holding the bag up, and I could see how much blood was in that. And it was a lot. It was a lot of blood. So he was obviously like, had the look of concern on his face because I had just lost so much blood. And then here I am feeling like I'm about to pass out. So they got me pretty stabilized there. Like I was okay. Still like very weak, obviously. But I was still fine because I couldn't feel anything. He still had the epidural running through me. Then they go to take me to mother baby. Most people can get up in a wheelchair and be wheeled over there, but I was not able to do that because of how much blood I had just lost. So they just took my whole bed into mother baby. Now I know I said before that that's where this stuff started, but this is like the main course of how hard recovery has been. From here on is postpartum. I realized how much blood I had lost. All my nurses just kept coming in and they kept saying postpartum hemorrhage. So once they had classified it as like postpartum hemorrhage, I was like, holy crap, like I've lost a lot of blood. And I feel like that. I felt very just weak. I felt like I was dying because I had no strength in my body. The epidural lasted me a long time until postpartum. My epidural started wearing off, so naturally I started feeling a lot more pain. So a few hours had went by and everybody was like, okay, we need to try to get you up and get you to try to use the bathroom. So I got up to try to pee, and when I stood up, of course, like all this blood just came pouring out of me, which I'm sure is normal. But I made it to the toilet to sit down, and I was getting ready to get back up, and my ears started ringing again. This time I could not get myself to like stay engaged. So my nurse was in there with me, and I said, my ears are starting to ring. So she pulls the little red thing that's beside the toilet to call a bunch more people in. So like this flock of nurses come running in, and I'm so thankful that they did, because they like barely got me up into a wheelchair and I was gone. Like I was out. I was totally limp. I felt like I was like dying. One nurse actually, she just picked my whole body up and just carried me and put me on the bed, because there was no way that I was transferring myself. I was out. My sisters were both in the room. Of course, my husband and the baby as well. My sisters were both in the room, so they, of course, were escorted out because of the trauma going on. But they were just trying to get me back, to come back to life there. Thankfully, I don't think it took too long. Of course, I was out of it, but I don't think it took too long for them to get me back. But I had no strength in my body. So after that situation, my OB came back in and decided it was time for a blood transfusion. So he had been threatening that from delivery, you know, like, you lost so much blood, so blood transfusion may be in your future. Well, by this point, he was like, okay, you are getting a blood transfusion. So, which was terrifying to me to hear, just a lot of things are going on in your head, like, you know, just all the risks that go with blood transfusions, and I'd never had anything like that before, so I had no idea how my body was going to react. So it was just scary. It was very scary to hear that I was going to have to get a blood transfusion. So that was the first one. So the next day we went in on a Tuesday night, and we left on Saturday. So that's how many days we stayed. So probably Friday, or Thursday, I would say probably, I thought that I was getting better. Then I woke up on Friday and felt extremely weak again. So he decided it was time for a second transfusion, because my blood count had gone down. Even after the transfusion, my hemoglobin was at like 7, even after the first transfusion. I thought that I was going home on Friday and was very disappointed, but I knew that I should not go home feeling this way. So he gave me a second transfusion. At this point, I am so discouraged. I'm gonna try to do this without crying. I think I can do it, but I was so discouraged. I had 50 stitches in my crotch. I was getting 2 blood transfusions by this point, a postpartum hemorrhage, blacked out in the bathroom, and I just felt like I couldn't enjoy being with my newborn, because I was trying to literally just come back to life because of everything that had just happened. That had been most of the traumatic part there. Not to mention, during all of this, I'm still not able to pee on my own. It had been 4 days or whatever, and I still couldn't pee. They said I had had so much damage from the whole delivery that I was so bruised down there, and it just wasn't happening for me. So I had countless Foley catheters while I was in the hospital. But one particular night was the most dramatic. It took them an hour and like 6 nurses to get a catheter in me, which was horrible because I had all this pressure build up in my bladder from not being able to pee, obviously, and it's taking them an hour to get a catheter in, and 6 nurses, and like 3 of them have flashlights, like their cell phone flashlights on me, trying like, they're just all tag teaming trying to get this catheter in me. I can't even explain how painful this was, because obviously where I'm so swollen, they had to spread me apart, and I have 50 stitches down there. So every time they did that, it felt like my stitches were being ripped open. And they were all like, at one point they were kind of like at a loss, and I was like, what is gonna happen if you can't get this catheter in, you know? So anyways, took them about an hour. They finally got that in. That was more traumatic, let me tell you. That was more traumatic than the whole, I would rather push her out like 20 times than go through that catheter experience again. It was awful. It was so painful. I mean, they were ripping me open, and which I know they have to do what they have to do to get the catheter in, but it was, regardless, it was so painful. So fast forward to 3.5 weeks, which is where we're at right now, and I'm still unable to pee on my own. So I've had a Foley catheter for 3 weeks now. I'm saying all this because I want to be so open and real with you guys, because I know that there are so many people that go through this kind of stuff and are like looking for others that are going through it, because a lot of stories on here are beautiful, seamless, natural, no epidural, all that stuff, and sometimes it's hard for everybody to relate to that. Just being open and honest here. To get a little bit personal, so throughout all of this, I'm just gonna be straight up honest. I was like, did not see God in any of this. I was like, I have been deserted. I have been left. Like, God, where are you? And a lot of times I feel like we're not allowed to ask why. I just want to relate to some people on here and let you know that you're allowed to ask why. Will you always get an exact answer of why? Maybe not. But in the hospital, I felt more deserted spiritually than I had ever felt before. And my husband was my rock, to try to like just bring life back into me, because I was like, where is God in all of this? And even weeks after, because this recovery at home has been hell. It is finally, like, on week 3.5 is starting to get much better. Even though I still can't pee on my own, I have a Foley cath everywhere I go right now. So I know that my testimony is not finished yet. And as hard as it was, I'm just now getting to the point where I'm like, okay, Lord, like, no matter what I feel and no matter what I've gone through, I know that you are still good and that you're still with me. And I know that there are these times when your faith is tested. And like my mom has said, it's a fight for your faith. You know, if everything was all peachy all the time, you know, where would faith have to even come in? So I know that, just like the scripture that says to count it all joy whenever you're tested and when trials come, that it is to produce endurance in you. And I truly believe that coming out of this, I will be so much stronger than I was before. And I know that that is why, or part of, I guess, the reason for going through all this. And even though my testimony is not quite finished yet, I am still just believing that the Lord has my best interest in mind, and He has been with me this whole time. We're so upset. It has just been, it's been a test and it's been a trial, and I am praying that it's almost over because it has been the hardest test of my entire life. This recovery has been the hardest thing I have ever went through, ever. Physically, mentally, everything. And I'm thankful that, you know, even through all of it, that I haven't got any, you know, postpartum depression or anything. There have been days when I just wanted to throw in the towel for sure, but I feel like that's kind of, you know, that's in a lot of people's stories. But I know that that was so quick, and maybe not in total, but I was talking really fast. I hope that if you're going through something and maybe you haven't seen the light at the end of the tunnel, that you just press forward and keep seeking God. A lot of testimonies are, you know, they're complete by the time that they're being told, and mine is still ongoing. Sorry about this random change, but she ended up getting fussy because it was time for her to eat, and so I had to finish it now, which is just life now, so I'm accepting it. But like I was saying, I truly believe my testimony is not finished yet, and I can't wait for it to be finished so we can be on the other side of this. But I know that, like I said, it's just producing endurance and strength, and so I am just along for the ride right now. But I pray that if you are in the middle of your testimony, like I said, you maybe haven't seen the light yet, that it comes very soon. And let me know how I can be praying for you in this season, because we all need people. We all need just a village to help get each other through things. So that is my birth story, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it helps somebody in some way. I plan on doing a postpartum video as well, talking about things that I did to help recover, and just tips and stuff for, you know, people who have gone through 3rd-degree tears, all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that, and I think that is it. So thank you for bearing with me. I know this is a long video, but a lot of people wanted to know about my birth story, so there it was, and I will see you guys in the next video. Jesus loves you.